So I would like to welcome to the stage a panel. Now the panel is going to be moderated by Jacki Vause from Dimoso, who you just heard answer the question there. We've also got Dave Ranyard from Dream Reality Interactive, Taiwan Yun from Super Evil Megacore, Oz Syed from... Oh, Taiwan can't make it, unfortunately. There you go. We've got Oz from Source Labs and Murshid from Cakebyte, but I will let them all introduce themselves and hand over to Jacki. Now, do you all have a mic? There's one there.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. My name is Jacki Vause. I'm the CEO of Dimoso, which is the world's best PR and marketing agency for the video games industry, as could be attested to by many people at this event. So less about me and more about the wonderful panel that you have in front of you. I'm going to start right at the end. Oz, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Oz Syed. So I live in Toronto. This is my fourth PGC event. I was there last year in PGC Toronto, and then Helsinki, London, and then this is the fourth one here. So I've been in the game industry for like 15 plus years, primarily on the Unity side, Unity engineer, Unity expert, and worked on a variety of projects, like from indie studios to big companies. And it's been like a remarkable journey because I've seen Unity growing from like 2.0 to 2022 and 2023. So that journey is like really fascinating. And with that, like the emergence of AI and how game engines actually evolve with it. So the definition of AI has changed over the years, and we'll actually touch upon that. So pretty much, I was also like for like 6 to 7 years, I was a professor teaching video gaming and software engineering as well in Toronto. I helped develop a completely new curriculum based on virtual reality, emerging technology, and AI was one of the components back in 2016. So that's basically me.
So I'm Murshid, the CEO and lead developer of Cakebyte, which is a game studio, a startup, we're part of the AD gaming community. We have set up our company on May of 2022, and we're working on 2 titles. One is the Battle Royale game, PR52. The other one is a racing game that's still in concept. I've been fascinated by technology and gaming since I was 12. I used to run GTA communities when I was 10 years old, and I started programming at the age of 10, 12, I don't even remember. Anyway, so right now on this panel, I'm really excited to talk about the changes that AI is going to bring to the game production, and hopefully everyone can learn something from it.
Hi, I'm Dave Ranyard. I've been in the games industry for a long time. I used to run a studio for PlayStation in London, and now I'm the CEO of Dream Reality Interactive, a UK game development indie studio, and I'm an advisor to a few companies as well. But prior to all that, I did a PhD in artificial intelligence, which I realized I received 26 years ago, like this month, and I can honestly say it's been useless for about 25 years. But now, I know a lot about it. It's actually, though, in truth, from the gaming perspective, I was writing AI code in 98. So actually AI has been in the games that we play, but also in the process for quite a long time. But I think probably what's happened is the explosion of generative AI opens up a lot of opportunities, but also questions about how we can use it as well. And so that's, it's like, there's a long tail to this, but it's just kind of exploded a bit recently. But I'm really excited to see how much AI is taking off.
So am I. So you're the right person then to explain what you see the difference between the AI that we're using right now within the games development process and generative AI. What's the difference? How has that changed things?
I mean, ultimately, generative AI is making content, whereas a lot of the other AI my PhD was prediction of where nuclear fallout would go after a Chernobyl-type accident. So it was predicting where things would be so that we could then make decisions about it. Whereas now, the stable diffusion models that people are talking about are basically taking inputs and then creating newish according to the lawyers, newish content that can be deployed. So that's, I think, the difference. And that content creation is something, you know, I mean, we all talk about an art furnace on big titles, or having, you know, huge titles with 1,000 artists working in different locations. And that, you know, 5 years might change. Maybe it'll be 100 artists for the same amount of content. So I think that's the big change. That's in that sort of content, and also in language, as in writing stuff, whether that's scripts or game design documents or whatever. So I think that's really what's kind of created this explosion.
Oz, does that... sorry, Murshid, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, so conventionally speaking, AI has been around for 3 decades or more. Specific to games, usually those are predefined logics. So it's like, if this, then that. So if you're a character in a game and the player shoots, I either run, or I either take cover, or I shoot back. So there's like 3 different logics there. But the AI right now that's explosive and everyone's talking about is more like, it looks at different data sets, different training, like what has been done before, from what decisions have been made before, and then it uses that in a new scenario to judge and apply that logic. So it's not a predefined steps, it's more like the AI is actually deciding on what to do based on previous training.
I wouldn't completely agree with that, actually. So a lot of the probabilistic AI is not state-based.
Yeah, it's not state-based.
Yeah. So, but that's still been going along for quite a long time. I mean, we made a game called iToy Play back in the early 2000s, and it used vision tracking. So that's not really a state-based AI system.
No, it definitely isn't, yeah.
But so I just think we should probably be clear to the audience.
Yeah.
It's not... Yeah, a lot of state-based has been used for NPCs.
Yes.
But actually, there's a lot of other AI around that's also been used. But it's more, I mean, like the camera phones, when they find a face, that's AI. That's been in phones and cameras for 15, 20 years. It's not a state-based.
I was talking about that they are not state-based. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you actually agreeing?
Definitely.
Yeah, so actually AI, the way I see is over the years, the definition has basically evolved just like technology, right? Like calculator was considered the first computer. I mean, then what is the computer later on? I mean, it got more powerful, like, and now like you have the computer in the form of a mobile or even a VR headset. So everything is a form of a computer. So the definition of computer has evolved over the years. Just like that, I think like the definition of AI has like evolved. So you would consider a pathfinding algorithm like in those days as an AI because it was developed by AI engineers. So and like in the maybe like if you just go back like to the really like to early 2000s or even like 1990s or something. So think about the AI, like what is AI? Like an NPC character is like wandering like up and down, waiting for the player to come towards it. Then it gets activated because it's within the range, and then it starts shooting. So that was considered AI. So, but now with all of this like generative AI and the technology that has taken a giant leap, gone are those days where like the NPCs had like intelligence of a doorknob. Now the NPCs actually can be as cunning as a fox and still have like the sharpness of a samurai sword. So that's the way the AI is evolving, and I would say like it's basically a transformative step. Like we don't know like how far it's going to go, but it's definitely not those days where like AIs would like be really primitive. Yeah.
So this transformation, are you using any kind of AI tools already, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many were here for the fun legal talk just before, but at the moment we're using AI in the creative process, not necessarily in the final product. And there are legal issues. I think of it like samplers in music, right? You know, you can sample James Brown. You can mess around with it enough so that you can't spot it, and you'll get away with it. But if somebody spots it, you'll have to pay. And I think that there will be some court cases like that around AI. So for us, we use it for aspiration. A lot of the artists, I mean, a great example we were building this beautiful world, and we needed a fountain. So our artist just used Midjourney to create 50 fountains, and then he picked one, and then he made it. And he was just using it for inspiration, so he didn't have to sketch stuff out. It improved his process. We were doing some ideation recently, an idea harvesting with a bunch of post-it notes, and I asked our AP, right, take each of the kind of key ideas that came out and use ChatGPT to write a one-pager on what that game idea is, just so that we had a documentation of what we were doing. But again, I don't think we're ever going to release those things. They're not like, they're so early, they're not really like a scary thing that somebody might see, and we're an indie anyway, we're not Sony or Microsoft.
So right now you see it as a game changer in the ideation process,
Yeah, the creative process,
inspiration, the creative. I'm going to put a shout in here for Ludo.ai, which actually does that, which helps you come up with game art, games, game scripts, GDDs basically.
I'd also say it's great for a first pass.
Yeah.
You don't get the blank page, you don't get, what's that word? But what you do get is a little bit bland, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly, but that I get as a starter point.
Yeah.
Where I'm really interested in is when you get more deep into the code and bringing in the generative AI into the heart and soul and the playability of the game.
I can see it used in some games, but it would be in a closed training set. So we would set the art style, we would set the boundaries, and perhaps where at the moment we might then outsource to the Philippines or Vietnam or something, we could probably do half of that outsource and then get those people to do the checking and the tidy up. So I think that would improve our process, make it faster and cheaper, but we'd do it in a closed loop. So we wouldn't be using, there wouldn't be any kind of Getty images sneaking in, let's say.
Gotcha. So Murshid, as a nerd, as a guy who's been coding since he was 12 years old, what do you feel? Are you learning to code? Are you learning to do the become an AI coder, so to speak?
I will
Prompter, engineer?
I would let the experts take care of that. Right now, I'm here to just make use of the tools as a game developer, because I cannot defeat what they are doing currently, because they're on a different level. So in our company, we are using AI. We are actually learning about the tools rather than just using it in our end product right now, because it's maturing so fast that even if you develop something right now, you're probably going to be beat by someone else. So it's not smart to do that. But two examples I can provide from our own company is that we are using AI, the image generation, for vehicle paint jobs. So you have like a car, and then you want to apply a paint job to it, which has like a specific template.
Yeah, and that can take milliseconds.
Milliseconds,
to
yeah.
change.
Exactly.
Like, okay, I want it now to look like a Batman car instead of like a Ferrari or whatever.
Yes, that's doable. That's something more complex. But we're starting off with just the texture, just the visual look. And for example, every day you give the players the option to choose from 3 different prompts, which are set by us, because we do not allow players to choose prompts by themselves. It leads to copyright issues. So the players can decide to pick one of the prompts, and then they get a design that they like, and they can decide to keep it in their inventory. And another example I can provide is we are using ChatGPT to create NPCs that are context aware. So you can tell a character that, hey, you are in this specific world, and your world is like a post-apocalyptic, like nuclear zone with certain enemies around you, and you are the owner of a gas station. You give that to a AI, and then the player can ask a specific dialogue to the character, and the character is going to respond so naturally that it feels like they are part of the world. So that's something we're using AI for in our studio.
Oz, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's interesting actually. So from my experience, ChatGPT is like definitely one of the tools that you could definitely use like for ideation, for brainstorming, because that's where it actually excels as well. So and there are like of course other tools, especially from like I'm coming from the programming side. So GitHub actually came up with GitHub Copilot. So that's actually a tool which it goes online, takes a look at all of the public repositories, and then from there it gives you suggestions and coding improvements like snippets or maybe even full functions. So that's another tool that actually could be a good arsenal, good tool in the arsenal for programmers. From the artist's perspectives, of course, like for really quick prototyping, there is like DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, and these tools. So yeah, so I think it's good enough to experiment with. play around and like collect ideas, but you cannot put AI in the driver's seat. You have to be in the driver's seat. So you have to like direct what you want from the AI instead of that leading you, and because then that's too chaotic, and you have to be the person who's driving it, and that one being the co-pilot. So that's how I see it.
So what you're saying is that essentially you've got these tools, you're using them, you are prompting them, and I have a great belief that we're going to move throughout these tools as we grow up with this technology and become much better at being prompt engineers than we, in everything, because AI goes into healthcare, goes into all sorts of different fintech. So thinking about that prompting, and we're using the prompting, do you see a time when AI might become part of, or the users and the players might become the prompters within a game?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, so I'm sure some indie's going to come up with a game where it kind of the meta game is, what game do I want to play today? Oh, I want to like shoot starfish with bananas, and it makes it for you, because that actually you could probably do that now, to be honest. So, and I think a more sophisticated version of that could come along. So, I don't know, I'm a time traveller. Today I'm going to do a story that's set in the Victorian age, and it kind of helps generate that. So I think that's very true. But, ultimately the prompt engineering thing is a bit like Google search terms were 20 years ago. It's like, oh, what do? I type in a word, and then it's like there was a sort of had to get used to that. There was like an onboard understanding of how to do it. And now you've got agencies that are just set up to work on search engine terms, right? So I think it will be a similar process, and probably similar businesses will work with it, and you'll be able to do that. And then the thing that's interesting with AI is you can close the loop, like I say. So if you were making an Assassin's Creed game, you could probably do some quite interesting things with prompts to make that particular one. But also the prompts might turn into a character talking to you, because it's not that much different to do some voice recognition and so on. So I think that might be how it actually manifests.
Murshid?
So games where the players will actually start prompting are usually sandbox games, where you can take Minecraft or other similar games where the players can actually be very highly creative. So you can say, create a statue of a dragon, and in Minecraft, like there's random blocks and it looks like a statue of dragon. So those are the types of games I feel like the players are going to start prompting in. Also, probably most of the metaverse projects out there.
I was going to say there's already starting user prompting of
Exactly. Yeah, so definitely that's where the players would take their liberty. But in different types of games where it's more story-based, narrative-driven, I think the players would probably not even realize that they're taking part in the prompting process. Yeah, so they don't have to, because the designers of the game will set the parameters in that way. I think that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because AI, generative AI, is actually really a master in storytelling. So when you actually are in the process of in such role playing and storytelling games, so the response that you're providing, so that actually becomes an input, and then that's actually leading to more creative, more personalized gameplay. So that's one place I think where generative AI would really excel in such games.
So I think up until now we've been quite positive in our discussion about AI and all the things it can do. We heard from Wigan about the things that can go wrong. Let's just delve into that darker side of things, and what do we see as potentially going wrong here?
Well, I think firstly there will be somebody's going to get a big court case against them. Just like the early hip hop artists sampled records. I think that will happen. But then, I think we will get over that. I think there's the chance for weird or inappropriate content to make it into games, because the human checking bit just gets the foot gets taken off the gas, and I think there'll be some scandals around that at some point. I mean, I won't want to talk about something that happened at PlayStation a long time ago. It was nothing to do with AI, but those things, new technology comes, people aren't quite sure how it's used. I think probably one of the risks is that the data that you put into things is actually, it's like the Borg. it becomes part of this big mass, and it might spit itself out somewhere else. So I would imagine that some unscrupulous people in the world might go in and actively train data sets on bad stuff to get a negative output, a negative reaction, and I think that's something that's a risk. I think it will actually. People say, "Oh, will it take all our jobs?" It won't take all our jobs, but it might take some. Localization is going to change. I remember years and years ago, my brother's a lawyer, and when he started, there was effectively a group of people who did all the typing of the contracts, and then they'd get printed out, and then the lawyers would read them and put red pen on them, and then they'd go back. I can remember saying to him, well, that's going to change. No, lawyers will never type anything. And I mean, obviously that has happened. And so there will be some, copywriting might change, and so on. So there will be some, quotes, casualties. I think what will happen is those industries will be a bit smaller, so they won't disappear, but those people will then it'll be more about prompt engineering and checking and culturalization and those sorts of things. So, it will have a change, and there'll be some negatives. But like any technology, to be honest, all technology, you get some good stuff and you get some bad stuff. And normally the bad stuff comes through bad actors in the real world, I would say.
My response to this is pretty straightforward, really. There will always be bad actors, no matter what type of technology. So content moderation and community guidelines is what is going to solve it, just like it has always been
But
the
then
case.
you've got AI moderating AI.
Yeah, there's a certain threshold that can always be moderated, and anything beyond that can be affected by the humans.
Actually, I have an interesting story here. So what are the things that can go wrong, right? So last week, I was working on a particular project. So how many of you here are Unity developers? Okay, quite a few, okay. So I actually develop a lot of tools as well on Unity. So one of my projects actually required to detect how to, when an asset is being renamed within Unity by a developer, then I need a prompt. I need to know that an asset has been renamed. So I know how it worked, but I just, for the fun, went to ChatGPT and said, hey, ChatGPT, can you actually provide this function that can actually detect the renaming of an asset? So it went through, and then it said, this is this particular class, and there is this method that you can use. And it happens so that just taking you a little off topic, but I'll come back. So a few weeks ago, do you guys remember, there was this news where a lawyer was actually using ChatGPT in a case where the ChatGPT actually produced a list of cases, and that they were non-existent. And it was really ChatGPT was really confident enough because the lawyer said, "Are you sure these are real cases?" It said, "Yes, you can find it in journals." So something like that happened with me. So I actually went and said, this doesn't seem to be a valid method. The one that you're saying, it doesn't exist, I think. So, and then maybe I thought, maybe I am wrong. Maybe Unity just brought it in the recent version. So I went back into the API and checked. No, it doesn't exist. Then I went back to ChatGPT and said, this doesn't exist. And then it said, apologies, so it doesn't exist.
Then it said, oh, thank you, I'm going to reset my data. And that is what I find so fascinating about AI, because everybody is sort of blindly going, hey, AI, this is good, these tools are great. But it's all it's predicated upon the validity of the data that it's using to come to its conclusions. And my problem with AI, and this is where I get a little bit worried, is that there is so much that is inaccurate, and you've just absolutely nailed it, Oz.
It's almost like the internet itself.
Really? Is the internet inaccurate? Well, this is true. And do you know what? This is the funny thing, because obviously I do work very heavily in games, but I also work with all sorts of different systems that are coded by intelligent geniuses like you guys. And it's even down to the bank systems and everything else, the data that they hold on banks over here in Dubai and Saudi Arabia are actually oftentimes flawed. They've got the wrong sort codes. There's all sorts of things that are going wrong with data. And so when we get into that horrible loop, how do you think we can counter that on a kind of on a macro level, in terms of how do you think we can work as good people within the games industry to ensure that our data is good?
Well, I think from a production perspective for us, I would start certainly the next 2 or 3 years with closed systems. I'm nervous about throwing my data into the sort of Dead Sea of ChatGPT and not knowing where it's going or who else is using it. I mean, you talk about lawyers using it, like lawyers creating contracts. Suddenly my contract is like there, owned by somebody else for anybody to see if they can extract it. So, I think I'm cautious, knowing a lot about AI, I'm cautious about making it very open how we use it, I think. But that's more paranoia for me than it's not necessarily being good to everybody else. But it's advice, I suppose.
So many people are dumping data into the large language models and other. They don't even realize that it's going to become part of the model later on. So that's something you should definitely avoid. Only put information that you don't expect to find out later on outside in the public domain. And perhaps use a more strict version of the model or something that is inbuilt by yourself. And that way it's much safer to deal with your own data.
Yeah, another point that I would like to add to that is basically it goes back to the first point that I made. So you have all of these tools, but you have to be knowledgeable enough to use that, and you have to be knowledgeable enough to detect. So in a way, like you cannot fully rely on these tools because they could actually throw like all sorts of wrong information to you, and you need to be knowledgeable enough to sort that information. What's wrong and what's right has to be determined, and only then you're going to be successful in whatever you're trying to do, because then this is going to be your co-pilot and not the pilot.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, actually, the co-pilot.
That's great. Do we have any questions at all from the audience right now? Because I'm mindful that we're coming up to... Oh, we do. Dave, I'm going to have to get you some exercise here. Do you have a microphone?
Thank you very much. Sorry, could you remind me who wanted the mic? Oh, down in the front row. There we go. It's easy.
Hello, my name is Jad. I work for NQ GameCon, and my question is, do you think eventually self-learning AI such as ChatGPT can have a well-informed enough database that gives us accurate results always, or will it always be inconsistent?
Well, I think, as we said, really, it's actually anything like that is only as good as its data, and I'd be very surprised if all the data going to ChatGPT is accurate. I mean, what was the chatbot that Microsoft released that became a Nazi in about less than 24 hours, was trained on Twitter? So I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that was like a simplified example of where it can go wrong. I think the same tech was used in China, and it's still used, and it's quite successful. So it might be to do with behaviour where it's set. I'm not saying I don't like America. I'm just saying it started in America, and that's what happened. Basically, it's down to how good the data is, and we all know what the internet's like. So I wouldn't hold your breath for that one, and that's why I think you do need to use it as a tool, and not as a master, because when that happens, we are in trouble.
Well, for me, I believe there's two major factors. There could be several, but the first one is obviously the data that is trained on, and secondly, have you heard about AutoGPT? Yeah, so AutoGPT is more like ChatGPT talking to itself, right? So you have a first response, which may be incorrect, but then ChatGPT can go back and read that again and come up with reasons why that is incorrect. And when it talks to itself multiple times, you end up with a response much further down that's more accurate to the original data.
I'd just like to say it's also the first sign of madness, talking to yourself.
Well, that's what our brain does, right, when we try to be creative.
Yeah, I think both of you actually summarized good enough, so I don't have anything more to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, just as a kind of add-on to all of this as well, I don't know if you saw just recently the company VoiceMod that is bringing out AI voices for use within games, metaverse, etc., etc. I mean, you're looking at using somebody's data on their voice, which, again, so if you think about your personal attributes, celebrities need to start thinking about their own personal attributes and almost licensing the use of their voice or keep it. So it could get really, in terms of data, I don't think that we'll ever have a clean kind of legislated. It's all down to, I think it's all down to the person at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Actually, I think people talk about your data is going to be really valuable in the future. And I think, unfortunately, we are going to live in a Black Mirror episode where we've all got a value to our data. And the celebrities is like, $10,000 a minute, and mine is like $1 an hour, whatever. So I think that's a sad truth of the future.
Oh, do we have any other questions? Well, I've got that. Right. Oh, one here.
What kind of check and balances would you see within the AI system? Speaking of information recovery or AI doing something which is illegal, obviously there's a big anxiety in the market concerning AI as well as the excitement about it, but how to make sure what technologies, except regulations, which I don't think are going to grip properly, do you see as an effective tool?
I think it's like any other content. You need to check it before it goes out for public release, and I think that's going to be the case. Now, how that happens could be interesting. It might be to do with closed betas, open betas. So I think if you had a living, breathing world, say you took Assassin's Creed, you make it a living, breathing world, right, with a number of different times, etc. Then you might have a closed beta that's 2 months ahead and an open beta that's 1 month ahead, and then the live version. I think you could probably, that could stand up in court. So if something was going wrong in the closed beta or even the open beta, you say, well, we have a process, we're trying to do this, and we can show that by the time it gets to the final one. But ultimately, I do think you need human eyes with a reasonable understanding of what is allowed, checking all parts of the content. That would be my approach.
Programmatically speaking, you can always generate different versions of a prompt, right? So when you're creating a game during production, you can create variations of that story, that narrative, or that model, and you can always leave out the ones that cross a certain threshold for violating the legal system. So always make sure you choose the right one that has the maximum chance of not making sure it doesn't break any rules and regulations.
Yeah, this is actually another aspect of it is, especially like with tools like I said, like GitHub Copilot, where it actually goes like into public repositories and references that. So in traditional sense, like when you actually code without these tools, like you go online, do some research, then you're taking a code from someone else, then you're supposed to at least like look at the license terms, and then some of those original authors would say like you can use this code as long as you actually cite who wrote that, or as long as that license is intact. But with these tools, none of that is actually taken into consideration. Now that's the problem. But I'm pretty sure like companies are aware of it. Like they eventually would come to that point where they could be like you could have that control, like saying I only need codes that will be publicly open sourced, and then there's no problem, right? Or it could come to a point where it can actually give a citation of like this is the list of references that I like took from, and then these are the license terms, and then now it's up to you to actually fetch the license for that. So it could come to that point. I'm pretty sure it's a matter of time, but it will come to that point.
I'm so glad you asked about checks and balances, because I think it's one of the most important things as we move forward in this era of new technology, just generally. And one of the things that as human beings we're not very good at is setting the checks for down the line. That's why you have prenups. That's why you have lawyers. We are in a wild west at the moment with AI, and it is incumbent upon us to try and set our own laws as we go along, because there is nobody else out there. There's no legislation saying you can't do this and you can do this. Now, I know the governments are getting together and creating AI ministries and all that kind of lovely stuff, but none of them know what they're doing. So it really is incumbent upon us to create our own checks and balances. And yes, that would stand up probably in a court that's knowing that it's legislating over something that isn't legislated for yet. But yeah, it's a classic problem right now. And I do think that, unfortunately, some tech will come in to provide those checks and balances from some clever person who'll go, okay, I need to come and do some checking and balancing for the industry.
I think we're going to have to leave it there. But so thank you very much. A round of applause for Jacki and her panel, please. Thank you. Great. Very insightful. Love that.